Uh, I always hate to say goodbye to Anita, but we have another guest who's joining us right now, who is a wonderful young man, a self-advocate, a mover and a shaker. Ryan Lee is joining us right now, Nancy. And do I have to, no, you have to let him in, Traven. He's going to let him in right now. He's connecting right now. And so thrilled to have Ryan here. Ryan's a wonderful writer and has posted several articles on many different outlets. There is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
Welcome to Autism Live and Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. How are you, Ryan?
Good. It's great to be here. First, I wanted to talk about like my perspective of autism, of how it was for me growing up.
Great.
You see, even before I knew I was diagnosed as a kid, I mean, I always knew I was different. I always felt like the oddball outside my fears. And I always wondered why I couldn't be accepted or why I couldn't fit in. I used to go in my own little world as a kid, I mean, all the time. And people used to call it dreamland or something else. And they didn't know how to handle me.
And at what age did you know you were on the autism spectrum, Ryan?
Well, I was diagnosed when I was 3 years old. And my parents told me like when I was 14 or 15 before I started high school. And I really didn't know what to think. I mean, I was embarrassed and ashamed of it. So when I got to high school, I tried to be like everyone else, like trying to fit in. I guess I tried a little extra too hard. And sometimes I acted out. Like when I was called a retard by a couple bullies, like my adrenaline sometimes kicks in and it made me so mad, I sometimes hit them.
It must have been very confusing for you to not have a diagnosis till later. You must have wondered, what's wrong with me?
Well, kind of. I didn't ask myself what is wrong with me. I just wondered that, am I different? I just didn't know how I was.
Yeah. And you say that when you first found out that you were, it wasn't something that you were proud of, but that has changed for you, right, Ryan? You are in a much different space about this, and you are now someone who speaks out about why you're proud of your diagnosis, and you're a wonderful role model for young people who are in that space that you were in before. Tell us how you got to that. How did you get through that, feeling ashamed to get to the place where you now accept and love yourself and are very proud of who you are?
Well, I read this book called Population 1, Autism, Adversity, and the Will to Succeed by this other autistic author named Tyler McNamer. And when I read the book, I realized autism is nothing to be ashamed of. I should be proud of who I am. And I needed to know, like, just be proud of my health. But there is a few problems about being autistic that I should tell you about.
Okay.
You see, sometimes I encounter people telling me that you don't look autistic. And I feel like I have to respond to them. Well, how the heck am I supposed to look then? Like, people always making assumptions about you without knowing the extent of your struggles. It's just frustrating. Having an invisible disability is challenging in many ways. And when people expect you to be, I don't like to say this word a lot, normal, or don't expect to act in ways that don't feel natural, and they don't cut you any slack when you make mistakes, and they have high expectations of you based on your age and height. And sometimes people are more understanding when they see physical symptoms of a disability, like if someone has a facial deformity or if someone's in a wheelchair. And this is why it's important to educate others. I wouldn't change who I am for anyone else, but it's still hard to fit into a world that doesn't always fit you.
Absolutely. But have you learned now that, like you were saying, that you felt different before? And I love one of the things that Temple Grandin says, different but equal. Like different, I think of different as always being fabulous. And I was raised to believe that, but it wasn't until I was older that I realized, oh, other people weren't raised that way. And I don't get it. I gotta say, I think that different is the way to be. Do you now feel that?
Yes, I feel different that way. And autism is a different way of thinking, feeling, and living. And there's still a lot more work to be done in this world, like fighting the myths. There is still this myth for years that autistics have or lack empathy. For years, they depicted us as emotionally, socially clueless robots. but people just don't understand. The more you get to know an autistic person, the more you realize how caring they can be.
Yeah.
And having a lack of empathy is something we shouldn't be punished for. I mean, we can have empathy. We just show it in a different way. But the problem is some people aren't really direct with how they're feeling. And one of the hardest, that connects to the hardest things about having autism is not being able to pick up on emotional cues right away based on one's body language or facial expression. And there are some who are just like disown you or don't want anything to do with you or don't want to be around you for one stupid reason or another. And they just leave us in the dark and don't tell us why. And they should tell us what is making them uncomfortable, and then we could try to fix it and not leave us in the dark. It's not a loss, not the end of the line.
Ryan, what are some of the
Understand?
special, Ryan, what are some of the special qualities that you think autism has is given you being on the spectrum? What are some of the special gifts and abilities?
Well, I do write poems to express my feelings in a way. Like I've written a lot, like over the past year and a half. Yeah,
That's great.
it's just my way of expressing myself.
Uh-huh.
And
I
Ryan,
mean-
what are, oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, every autistic has a gift. Like they just have to find out what it is.
What do you want for your future, Ryan? You're still a very young man. What are your hopes? What do you want to do with your life?
Well, to be honest, Shannon, when I was little, I really loved animals, and I wanted to go in the animal field and maybe be a vet or help in a vet technician. I went to Tuskegee University like for 5 years and studied animal science, and I got my degree. But to be honest, the animal field was a lot harder than I would thought it would be. So things didn't quite work out. But I'm just trying to figure myself out, who I am. And to be fair, not everyone gets the job that they majored in college.
And so do you, clearly you write, and as you said, you've been writing for the last year and a half. Do you think that maybe this is a path for you, that you want to be a writer?
Well, I write just for like as a hobby and try to inspire. But I haven't written a lot lately because I'm kind of out of ideas. I'm not that creative of writing a novel. So I'm still in the phase of figuring out who I am. But in the meantime, I just want to foster new relationships and make new friends, get to know new people.
Wonderful. Nancy, did you have a question for him? I feel like I'm hogging him.
No, not at all. What would you say to other young people like yourself who are on the spectrum and maybe struggling with finding their way in the world?
Yes, I would tell them that there are positive characteristics about you, no matter who you are. Just tell what you have to offer. And there won't be things that everyone value, but it doesn't matter. Just like yourself. And I'm still learning that. Flaws and all, you are who you are.
Right. Okay. Very
Yeah,
good.
Autism is not a disease. Autism is not a disease or an illness. It makes us who we are. And there's one thing you should know. Like there have been, I know you must have heard that some people think about curing autism, but there also has been few talk about if we could separate the symptoms from autism and still have it. I mean, that's not how it works. I mean, the symptoms are like a package deal with autism. Like you can't diagnose autism without symptoms, you know.
Yes,
And-
but there are some aspects of autism, and tell me what you think about this. Honestly, there are some, because both Nancy and I have sons that we love who are on the autism spectrum, and the way that they diagnose autism currently are deficits in specific areas. And, I happen to believe that everybody is a little bit on the spectrum. You just may not qualify for a diagnosis. So, I have problems with sensory things, for instance, but not so badly that it's considered a disability and not so badly that I qualify for an autism diagnosis, right? If I went to the doctor, they would say, well, you have sensory issues, but you don't qualify for an autism diagnosis. And like social issues, that if somebody doesn't understand what the social constructs of something are, that is something that could potentially, if it is big enough, get you a diagnosis of autism. But some of that is skill. That obviously you are this amazing, intelligent young man, and there was a time when you were born when you did not know how to write, but you've
Yeah.
learned how to write. That's a skill. And
Yes.
not everyone can learn that skill to the level that you do, but most people can learn how to write in the world. Not everybody, but most people. So my question is, if you get better and better, and clearly you're very good at social skills because you're here with us, and you advocated for yourself to be on the show and wrote to me, and you were persistent, which I applaud you for, because that's what gets it done. So my thing is, if there are parts of autism that are in your way, there are other parts of autism that are who you are, but there are parts that are a skill deficit. If we teach that person that skill deficit, just like we do with everything, like you were taught to write, does that, I don't think that changes autism, because I think autism is a way to think, but eventually could someone get to the point where they have autism, but they don't have a disability? How do you feel about that?
Well, the thing is, with our symptoms, we can work on them, but that doesn't mean they'll completely go away. And there's some things I have to say about the social types of having autism. The thing is, the people on the higher end of the spectrum, like myself, like, it's not fair that the world keeps on telling us to change, keep on saying that we need to be more appropriate. And they need to not discriminate against us like that because we're different. But just because we can talk, say sentences fluently, and have verbal language, like not like the people on the lower end of the spectrum, that doesn't change the fact that we're still on the spectrum. Sometimes it's hard for us to find the right words to express what we want to say.
Yeah.
And as with any other person on the spectrum, we still have significant challenges in our everyday lives that stand in the way of us having a comfortable life or succeeding in school. And just so you know, it's important to remember that autism is autism. And people whose disability can be invisible, we're very aware of our own difficulties and extremely sensitive to others' negative reaction. And autism is a word just to characterize how our brain functions, not how broken it is, and ways should be respected. But people still see us as broken, and it's not fair.
Well, I thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that you're amazing.
And there's one more point I want to say.
Okay, we've got about 1 minute left, so make your point.
Yeah, the thing is, some autistics are very blunt and literal, and sometimes we have no filter that includes verbal filter or sensory processing filters. We say what's on our mind and exactly how we think, because if we don't say, we lose what we're trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good point, Ryan.
And it's refreshing, right?
I agree with Shannon that you're a remarkable young man. You're a great role model to everybody. And hopefully our audience who is listening today has been inspired by your story.
Thank you so much for being with us, Ryan.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.